You're listening to TR on the AM here on 1580 WDAB.
Tim, tell us where the idea for Swamp Rabbit Tales came from.
Well, I guess geographically it came across the street when I was at the coffee house. About a year and a half ago, I was just working on potential products. I'm a freelancer, writer, illustrator, and I just had really fallen in love with Travelers Rest, and I was starting to hear some of the stories around here. And there's some really good stories when you go back in the history of Travelers Rest. So I said, somebody needs to capture that.
Where did you really begin trying to dig into the history of Travelers Rest?
Well, I had to buy some of the historical books and go to the library, do some research. The one thing I have to say about historical books is that they're usually a little dry reading. So my goal was to capture the stories that are in there that are fascinating and just sort of cut everything else out. And I also had a goal of reaching kids. So I've written for kids, had some books published, and so I tried to take some of these stories and put them in more of a children's form.
I'm a big history guy, and I've lived in Travelers Rest my whole life. And hearing the stories of George Hyder, who was one of the last engineers, guys on the train, what was it like talking to him and hearing him tell some of his stories?
Well, George is a fascinating guy. You ought to interview him sometime. Yeah. We found him because we were featuring the Whistle Stop Cafe, and that was during the time when they were doing the mural. Was being painted, and we looked at the face. I saw that the mural painter was looking at a photograph, and I said, well, who's the person on there? She said, this is a guy named George Hyder, and he lives up in Marietta. So I said, I need to get a hold of this guy, because obviously he has some of the secrets about this particular trip when that train went up to Echo Valley. So we found him. If you've ever been to his backyard, you'll never forget it. He has roads in his backyard. He has a blacksmith shop. Wow. He has a sawmill. All this is in his backyard with a fire truck, his own personal fire truck in his backyard. He does bluegrass. He's done quite a bit of that. And we were videoing him doing some songs, and we were just about done. And then he got out his harmonica and just stuck it in his mouth and without a rack, and then picked up his guitar and started playing them both at the same time. I'd never seen anybody do that before.
Like I said, I've lived here my whole life and had no idea that about Echo Valley or had any clue as to his existence at all.
Echo Valley was really fascinating to me, and especially because I found a lot of folks in town, the older folks in town, remember going there when they were kids. It was an old Western theme park, if you want to put it that way, but it was in the 60s, so it was very different than a theme park would be today. I mean, they had gunfights out in the street. You wouldn't see that today.
No.
Also, they had this like sky chair ride that would just like have one little rail in front of you, and you're 40 feet up in the air above the lake. So I don't think you'd see that today either. So I was just sort of, I grew up in the 60s. I'm not from here, but I just remember that the 60s was a very different time.
Yeah, a little less heavy on the litigation than we are now.
Right.
So you could get away with that one bar safety on the sky. Sounds very much like the old ghost town in the sky up in Maggie Valley.
Yes,
very similar type of theme park.
I think those Western towns were really popular in the 60s. And this one was really pretty successful for about 4 years.
Well, if you think about what was on television during that time frame too, the number one TV show for years and years was Gunsmoke.
Right.
And then the other Westerns that were on surrounding it. So you could see where they would try to capitalize on that.
Oh, yeah. I used to watch Gunsmoke, so I certainly remember all that.
I'm like Cameron, such a big history buff. And especially not being from here in Travelers Rest and wanting to learn as much about it as I can and fascinated by trains and stories like that. It was just phenomenal.
Well, we started with the train because we felt like that was the fundamental thing about this town. But a couple of the other things that are very fascinating about TR's history is NASCAR. NASCAR has very big roots right here, actually even on Main Street in TR. And also Paris Mountain. There's some pretty good history up there. There was a big hotel at the top
Yeah.
of Paris Mountain 100 years ago. So those are a couple of other things we're thinking about featuring down the road.
What kind of response have you gotten?
One of the best things was I met another person that worked at Echo Valley.
Oh, wow.
So his name was David Bailey.
Okay.
He was one of the outlaws that got shot, and he showed me a picture of himself laying in the street.
This guy died every day.
Yes. He's better than a cat. He's got a lot of lives. He also was one of the people that would, this is another thing that wouldn't happen today. He would ride a horse next to the train and board the train from a running horse.
Wow.
And then they would stage a holdup on the train, and they would get a lot of tips, apparently. Not necessarily actually robbing the people.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'd probably tip as well if somebody had just pointed a gun at me. What do you think of the show? But before you go there, you mentioned you're a freelancer, and I have lived the freelance life for about 2 decades. So you got anything else going on you want people to know about?
Two of the projects that I work on pretty consistently, and one I just finished, I've worked for Highlights Magazine for a lot of years.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
And I do hidden pictures for them.
Yeah.
So I just finished one of those, sent that out. I've actually done over 500 of them. So
Is that one of the things where they tell you to go find, you have
there's
to
little
circle?
objects.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to find them hidden
I
in
used
the
to
scene.
love highlights when I was a kid.
And I've been working for Cornell University to promote maple syrup for about 7 years.
Interesting.
So maple syrup has been a big part of my life the last few years too.
So cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have a personal website that people can check out? Or
Yeah, you can look up timdaviscreations.com. So that would give you a little idea of the other stuff that I do.
Okay, cool. So trains and maple syrup and hidden pictures.
That's the
Those-
life
those
of
are
Tim
big.
Davis.
Yeah.
Right? The life of
I
Tim
like
Davis.
it.
And
I love it.
Love it. Tim, thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming on and talking with us
Glad
this
to be
morning.
here. Thank you very much. for having me.
Fantastic stuff.